is your name? Did you live here? Did you die here? Do you want to take a trip? Hi, guys, and we are back. Once again, I'm Tom, your ghost host. This is Strange Journeys, and we're glad you're here. We've got Lewis Powell IV. Dagny is back with us after a long hiatus, and the same as Selena. She's finally back. The last time she was able to be with us was on the Christmas show.
Yeah.
Creepy Christmas. Yeah, that was fun. There were some creepy stories on that show.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen Creepy Christmas, you can go back and watch it on YouTube. We are so glad everyone's here. Remember that we provide these shows first and foremost for you, for the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics that we cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. Now, remember that this episode is pre-recorded. We had to do that for technical reasons, but we treat them just as if they were our live stream. We don't do anything different. We start out and we talk and we carry on just the way we always have. But it will be broadcast on the regular 2-week interval. Okay? So our last live stream or our last main show was Strange States, Mississippi. Now, that was a redo or a redux. We came back and did it again, added a few more things because that one show that we tried to, our last try at live streaming, Elizabeth was on with me. We just had problems. My internet went out just as we were ready to go on, and so we came back and did it again. And so that was the last main show that you saw. Now, by the time this airs, you will have seen the last revisited show. We're started out on our Beware the Black-Eyed Kids from season 1. Do you remember that show? And that was some creepy stories and about the Black-Eyed Kids, and even some unusual iterations of that, the White-Eyed Kids. That was really odd. So the week after this show airs, then we'll be following up with Beware the Black-Eyed Kids Part 2. So for the next 3 weeks, well, by the time this one airs, you'll have another week. That's one thing I'm going to have to keep remembering is the timelines of when these airs. So one thing I do want to announce is that by the time this show airs on April 23rd, you will have had 2 Strange Journeys night treks. So I want to hear from you on the night trek shows. Let me know what you think about those. They're coming in on Friday nights at 10 p.m., but they'll be available for viewing afterwards on Facebook and YouTube. So there we go. That's all we got to say about that. One thing, if you are watching on YouTube, what are you supposed to do? Thumbs up.
Like and subscribe.
That's it. What he said. All right. We've about got that down, but that's one of the things the experts say you have to ask every show. So we're trying to do that. So we ask every show, would you please like and subscribe to the channel? And we're up to about 50 people right now. So we're doing pretty good. It's not where I'd love it to be, but like I said before, I want this to grow organically. I don't want it to be forced. I don't want to pay somebody to get me subscribers. I want people to subscribe because they want to subscribe to our channel. But also, we need help putting this show together. If you're one of our patrons on Patreon, you don't know how much I appreciate this. Um, we're we're at the level now where it's basically covering the cost. We can still use some more help, and we would appreciate it, but we're not just throwing money into a hole anymore, and we appreciate the help. If you can help us on Patreon, thank you. And like I said before, I do this and I put my money into it because I want to. Okay. So I'm not complaining. It'd just be nice to have some help. Another way you can help, and you'll see it scrolling across the bottom there, is buying gear or stuff from strangestuff.live. And you can get, well, see, here's the banner heading for the website there, strangestuff.live. You can get your Watchers t-shirt, your Strange Journeys pillow, which I think that's the one Dagny got for her mother as a Christmas present. Cool.
Oh,
cool. Coffee mugs. I was thinking coffee mugs and bags at the same time. And a Strange Journeys shirt. So that's another way you can help support the show and show off some cool stuff. All right, we've got a weird one today, probably one of the most macabre that we have ever done. So let's get started. Author Michael Lessie was a college student in Madison, Wisconsin when, out of boredom, he visited the Wisconsin Historical Society. He remembers the space was dark and empty. Janis Joplin was playing somewhere in the distance. He met curator of iconography, Paul Vanderbilt, who introduced him to an archive by turn-of-the-century portrait photographer Charles von Schaech. I thought some of the studio portraits were pretty amazing, Leslie recalls. The whole experience that day seemed like a separate universe. Intrigued by these striking images, he wanted to know more, so he scoured the spools of microfilm and read countless newspapers from that time period. What he found were often haunting, dryly written accounts of the harsh existence in this small Wisconsin town. Banks closing, children dying of disease, admissions to the local asylum, the American dream gone wrong. So in 1973, he published a book from his findings called The Wisconsin Death Trip, chronicling a period from around 1890 to 1910 of the possibly cursed little town of Black River Falls. And what follows is a retelling of just a few of the stories recounting that possible curse. Now, mysteriousuniverse.org tells us, located out in the wilds of the U.S. state of Wisconsin, just 39 miles northeast of La Crosse, is the quaint small town of Black River Falls. The town was founded in 1839 by a sawmill operator named Jacob Spaulding on land that had once belonged to the Ho-Chunk Indians before they were dispersed and assimilated by the European settlers pouring into the region. And as I've researched into this, one thing I found out that there were a lot of like carpetbaggers after the Civil War. These land agents, I guess you would call them, would go back east and promise all untold wealth for buying property in Black River Falls, and the people would buy into it, and they'd come out there, and it was hard scrabble, and they had a hard time growing anything. Well, starting from around 1890, something happened to this idyllic place. Some dark cloud came hovering over, and suddenly, out of nowhere, the town would be utterly besieged by chaos, disaster, calamity, insanity, suicide, murder, and deranged mayhem, to become one of the most cursed settlements on record, caught in a downward spiral of horrors that would last for the next decade. It started with the closing down of several of the sawmills, and then a series of incredibly bleak and cold winters. The people who stayed behind in this freak weather were faced with the bitter cold and encroaching starvation, as well as an onset an epidemic of disease, as well as a major flood that ravaged the area. The previously rather pleasant town, of which a reporter had once said, "Nowhere in this great continent of ours can be found a more desirable residence than Black River Falls," it had fallen apart so rapidly that there were whispers of witchcraft and devil worship. The wrath of nature and paranoia about supernatural forces mixed together with their sudden joblessness and the added horror of the great financial depression gripping the nation at the time, lesser known but just as devastating as the one that hit in the 1930s, all conspired to create a bleak and volatile environment that would become a breeding ground for the terror and grotesqueries to come. And here are just a few of the macabre events from that time period.
All right. Mrs. Sarah Smith. The suspicion of a botched funerary procedures led to an investigation at the Rosedale Cemetery. It was discovered there that Mrs. Sarah Smith had accidentally been buried alive while in some kind of trance or coma-like state. Her body was found partially on its side, and the hand was positioned towards the face. Reportedly, Smith had bitten her fingers half off, and it's believed this occurred when she realized her fate.
Oh, can you imagine waking up? I mean, that's one of the most horrible. I mean, that's why they started in Europe the bell attached to the headstone and a string down inside the coffin, so that if there was, that's where the saying "Saved by the Bell" came from, as we've all heard.
How horrible is it that they needed to do that because it was happening?
Yeah.
Yes.
Once
Exactly.
is too many times, but it was
Yep.
happening.
Yes. Well, but I mean, there was suspicion around her death. Somebody in her family was like, "Wait a minute, something's not right here." And then when they went to the funeral home, they were like, "Okay, well, let's go dig her up and make sure." But by then it was too late, and she had gnawed her fingers half off.
Ugh.
Ow.
And that was crazy. All right, Dagny.
Let me get over that one for a second.
That one, I mean, it's one of the more macabre of the stories.
I love this story this whole curse that we're covering, because it is really macabre like that. You're right.
Yeah.
But
It's
So,
well. Let me say
another-
this before you go on. I should have mentioned this. I mentioned this to the three of you before we started recording. But the book, the Wisconsin Death Trip by author, what's his name, Michael Lessie, is basically a picture book. Okay, that's why I didn't pull any pictures into this show, because he has a whole book of just pictures of the. I mean, there are thousands, and he only picked about 200 for his book, and they're all. They're not necessarily macabre, unless you realize that, like in a lot of them, they got portraits of the dead people, the dead infants, the dead children, and they're posed portraits with the dead people, and so
Which
one,
often in that time,
yes,
oftentimes these portraits were the only portraits these people ever had taken,
right,
and
Yeah.
they had to wait until they were dead.
yeah,
yeah, that
and
was very
then
common back then.
they say you can tell by looking closely at the picture, and the only person in perfect focus, will be the dead one, because that you had to sit still to take a picture back then.
I find those pictures really interesting, actually.
They
But
are, and these pictures are interesting. But like I said, I chose because of the fact that he actually published a picture book. That instead of just grabbing a bunch of his pictures and throwing them on here, we'll just recommend the book.
yeah, there we
Because
go.
I'm sure. And like I said, a lot of them are just like a girl standing by a river. They're benign. They're just good photos. But some of them are just, when you realize what it is, it's really macabre. Okay, Dagny, go ahead into the next story.
Okay, well, John Anderson and his 10-year-old brother. John Anderson, 13, ran away from home with his 10-year-old brother. From there, Anderson shot the owner of a remote farm at close range. The boys took over the deceased farmer's property until the farmer's brother paid a visit. The younger of the boys confessed to the crime, but Anderson took off, leading sheriffs on a manhunt. An officer was killed during the chase, but Anderson was eventually caught and sentenced to life in prison.
13 years old.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
13 and 10. I mean, well, I think the 13-year-old was the instigator of all this, and the
Yeah.
10-year-old was just following around.
same town,
But-
though.
Yeah, same location. This is all happening within a 10 to 20-year period. And like I said, we're just going to touch the tip of the iceberg, folks. There's no way we can get into everything that happened. As a matter of fact, after we talk about these stories, we go into some of the more paranormal ones later on. So hang on to that after we go through some of these stories. But John Anderson was 13 years old. Runs away from home, goes to this other farm, shoots the farmer. I mean, he took a shotgun at close range and took out the farmer. Well, I mean, what 13-year-old does that, especially in the 1890s? Wow. And then,
Times.
well, yeah. And then as they're pursuing him, a cop gets killed.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, nothing in our research came out and actually said that he did it, but how could a cop get killed while he's chasing a killer? Unless the killer
True.
kills him. I mean, I guess there could be friendly fire or whatever, but the boy was captured. So,
Yeah.
But it looks to me like that he killed at least two men, the farmer and a police officer. Wow. Just macabre. All right, Selena.
Okay. 60-year-old woman tries to cure herself. Believing that the unknown mass was cancer and would take her life, she attempted to remove it herself. To cure the supposed malignant ailment, the woman doused herself in kerosene. She
Wow.
then went out in her backyard and set herself ablaze.
Wow.
Crazy.
So she has a growth on her back
Mm-hmm.
that she thinks is cancerous.
So she sets herself on fire.
Without, I guess this is called gallows humor, but that's a little overkill.
I was so gonna say overkill, and I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna say it.
I know it's a bad joke. I mean, that's why I call it gallows humor. And probably inappropriate, and I apologize, but that just the first thing that popped in my mind. But something's happening.
Yeah.
You know, for a grown woman, 60-year-old woman, instead of going to the doctor to find out what this thing is on her back, she believes it's cancerous. I mean, I think just pouring the kerosene on it right there might have taken care of it. You
True.
wouldn't have to do anything else. But then lights yourself on fire. My. Mrs. John Larson, the wife of a farmer, suffered from mental illness and believed that devils were after her. She took her 3 children out to the beach and then drowned them one by one in Lake St. Croix. John Larson searched for his family, but only recovered the bodies of 2 of his children. Now, something's going on. There's something in the water, something in the air. I don't know, but this is, I mean, what drives a woman to drown her children? You know, what
You make
drives
me
a
want
woman?
to. You make me want to investigate like toxins around there.
Well, yeah, and I'm surprised that in our research nothing like that came up. I mean, we'll get to one in a minute where there was a disease came through, but it didn't affect anyone but the children. But what's affecting these adults? You know, the 13-year-old boy, the 60-year-old woman that thought that she could pour kerosene and light up and cure cancer, and Mrs. John Larson that feels like she has to go drown her children because they have devils in her. I mean, it's So on to the next.
Diphtheria. In the early 1890s, the diphtheria epidemic ravaged the town of Black River Falls. As a result, many children passed, which subsequently caused schools to close. Citizens also burned down houses of the sick in an attempt to stop the disease from spreading. The epidemic caused even more suicides and murders due to the grief and panic caused by the deadly illness.
Wow, not only are the kids dying, the families are kind of freaking out. And in some of my research and some of the videos I watched, they were burning down these houses that they thought were infected with diphtheria, but they got some houses wrong.
We've seen a little bit of that type of psychological impact from COVID. Not that extreme, thank God, but you see it affect people just with the idea of a disease going around.
Yeah, sometimes the mental side of it can be just as devastating as the physical, biological side. But yeah, I mean, supposedly they burned down some of the wrong houses with the implication that there were people still living there, you know, and then people committing suicide and murders due to this.
Okay, and then there was the Wright family and the drifter. For approximately 2 days, an out-of-luck man was given food and shelter by the Wright family. When one of the children referred to the man as a tramp, he attacked them and ransacked the house, looking for money. After he fled the home, the drifter wandered into a pond and shot himself in the head.
Wow. Again, I mean, you're right. What is it? Something in the air? Is it something in the water? I mean, these people are going
They did
insane.
have a bit of a depression at the time. I wonder if some of that psychology was playing with all the rest of it, and people were just losing it.
Yeah, that's what the article from where'd I put it? Mysterious Universe said the sawmills closed down. A flood came through. The
Yeah,
ooh,
besides all this other stuff.
yeah, and then a couple of winters that were just extremely harsh, and then all of this compounding and compounding, and then the diphtheria epidemic hits. I mean, I guess you
And a
can
few other things, as
understand.
we'll
Yeah,
find out.
right. I guess you can understand why a couple of people went bonkers, but
It's a
I
lot.
mean, oh yes. All right, Selena.
Okay. The 15-year-old pyromaniac. 15-year-old Lydia Berger set fire to her father's barn and house. The teen sought revenge because her father had beaten her for taking off to go to a carnival. When a kind neighbor took her in and her family, Berger then set fire to their property.
Oh
The
God.
vindictive teen continued to set more structures ablaze until she was finally apprehended. She then confessed to arson.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you've been caught, so yeah, I did
So
it.
she confessed.
But
Yeah.
another
Mm-mm.
15-year-old, she's just going
Mhm.
around setting fires. What's the
Now, if you recall, though, at that time period, weren't those ages 13, 14, 15 more mature than we are now, as far as like they would be getting married early,
Yeah.
they would have
Right.
children, homes early.
Mhm.
So are we kind of talking about like our 16, 17-year-olds,
or older?
Yeah, I mean, like,
Because
but I mean,
yeah, 12 to 15 girls were being married off to.
Mm-hmm.
it may sound
Yeah.
young to us, but it's almost like the time period that they would be in their teenage
True. I mean, that
issues.
could be some of it. Most of the schools, you didn't go to school till you were 17 or 18. You only went till you were like 14 or 15, and then you went out to work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That reminded me, a few years back, I tried to take a test from where mid to late 1800s, the eighth graders' final exam. I could not. as a grown man, I didn't know half of what it was talking about, and I mean it was higher math and
Oh.
I mean philosophy and theology and science, and I mean it was just, oh my God,
That's
they were.
so interesting. That's cool.
Look it up online sometime. Because I sit there and I tried to take it, and I'm like, holy cow, there was algebra in there that I never touched, calculus. I'm like, oh my God. And they say we'd never use it. How did they ever use it? But they, what is this? We're coming to
People ended up
150
in
years ago.
space.
They were more educated than we were. We talk about them as being uneducated, but when they did get to school, they got into some heavy stuff. So, unholy matrimony. A young man called upon the woman he liked to ask her for her hand in marriage, but he was turned down. Enraged, the scorned man shot her 3 times and then turned the gun on himself. Another spurned man publicly attacked and killed his ex-wife and her family following their divorce. Around the same time, a teen bride-to-be was institutionalized after her fiance left her, and she subsequently took her own life. Similarly, a 50-year-old man hung himself prior to having to sign divorce papers. Now, even the promise of young love and a happy marriage was not even there. I keep going back to what Dagny said. You want to check on the toxicity of of the dirt, the water, something. It was going on there, and that's, I honestly had that kind of thought while I was researching all this, and I never came across anybody. Now it may be out there. I'm not saying it's not, but I never came across any kind of research into that side of it.
I have
Could
another
there
theory
be?
too.
Okay,
My other theory is that 10 years was horrible everywhere,
true.
and we just haven't paid attention.
I mean, that could be. I mean, you're probably onto something there. It could be that these were just highlighted, and if we looked around the country, we'd probably be finding the same thing. But it's
I
just
wonder.
unique that all this happened in one small town for a
So
shorter
much,
period of time, but
so
then it
much
went away.
bad happened all
Hmm.
just dumped on that town.
Yep. All right, we're moving on.
The window smasher. Mary Sweeney claimed to have destroyed over $50,000 worth of glass and was known throughout the state as the Wisconsin Window Smasher. She was a former high school teacher who ran away from her husband and used cocaine liberally, noting
You
that it
think?
quiets her nerves. Sweeney was jailed more than 100 times and was eventually sent to an asylum.
Wow.
It quiets her nerves. Boy, I'd hate to see her without it.
Mhm.
I'm glad she's got it then. If that's her nerves being quieted. Oh, how many did it say? $50,000 worth of glass.
$50,000.
I
It's a
saw
lot.
the picture of that lady too, and that one, she was like pretty elderly.
Oh yeah,
I-
yeah.
Like, you kind of picture this like, young like crackhead, but
Mhm.
no, she was
Yeah.
like 70 years old or something.
Retired school teacher, a cokehead.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, the next one's another somber one. Dagny.
Miss Ira Ames. The naked body of a housewife was found on the side of the road approximately 6 miles from town. Having recently lost a child, it was believed Miss Ira Ames wandered away from home in a fit of delirium and froze to death. The authorities believed she may have starved prior to succumbing to the elements.
Sad.
And that's another thing is they come across some of these. They would find people starved to death with food right there where they could
But
have
food's
eaten.
still available. Yeah.
Yeah, food
Yeah.
in their house, and they starved to death in their house. How can you die of starvation if there's food right there?
The loss of the will to live, I suppose.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, something.
Sad.
Oh, all right, Dr.
Okay.
Jacquish.
Okay, Dr. Jacquish, a well-known doctor, claimed that his soul had separated from his body and he was taken to heaven where he talked to his long-dead father. While everyone seemed to agree he was a man of sound mind, his family began to fear he had gone insane.
Well, I mean that's not really out of the ordinary in a sense, but
Mhm.
with everything else that was going on, people begin to wonder about this well-known doctor. What's happening to him too. And then there was the Red Cedar Lake monster. A farmer who lived near Red Cedar Lake claimed that a 40-foot long reptile appeared out of the water and carried away one of his hogs. Now, that's the only strange creature sighting I could find during that time. But
Hmm.
but you kind of more or less expected it. You know what I mean? I mean, like where are the UFOs now? Where are the
But
where are
they're in
the
the north.
grays?
They're
Yeah.
in the north, and they're having major issues with really cold winters.
Mhm.
I don't think many reptiles even live up there.